Welcome to this new conversation about entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organizations. Today we are with Andreas Holmer, is the co-founder of MAQE, and we will learn a bit more about Andreas and his company in a moment. Welcome, Andreas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us. Together with us, we also have Claire Fisher, that recently participated to one of our trainings. Welcome, Claire.
Hi.
So the plan for today is really to explore MAQE's experience in, I wouldn't say adopting probably, but playing with and taking inspiration from the Rendanheyi. Andreas, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and MAQE? What are you up to? What is the company doing?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. As you mentioned, we are just getting started with this stuff. So an open invitation to you guys and to anyone listening in afterwards to reach out and provide feedback, because we're getting started and we need all the help we can get as we move forward. I'll try to lay out what we're doing and what we're struggling with and so on as we go forward. But in short, so my name is Andreas. I'm originally from Sweden, found my way in Thailand 10 years ago by ways of the US and Ireland and a bunch of other places. And here I co-founded and I'm currently the CEO of a company called MAQE. It's a digital consulting firm doing primarily digital commerce type work for enterprise customers in Southeast Asia. Some rough numbers: about 80 people, 2 offices in Bangkok and Khon Kaen in Northeast Thailand. And we, like I mentioned, have been doing this for about 10 years now. And up until this point have been a very traditional matrix organization, I would say. But have from the very beginning of MAQE's history been experimenting with new, better ways of working. There's a long story here, but I'll make it short. My co-founder Andrew and I are very different. He's an engineer, I'm a designer by trade, but we saw eye to eye on this notion that happy people do good. And if we treat people well, everything else will follow. And even our first website just said that happy people do good work, and everything else sort of has evolved from that, right? I think, like most organizations, the idea of purpose and core values and all those things came in later, a few years later, until we realized that we actually need that kind of stuff. But it's been for the longest time, it's been something that we've done internally. It's been completely different from or separated from everything that we've done externally. So the things that we're doing for customers is one thing, building commerce platforms. And then what we do internally in terms of how we set up the organization and how we pay people, how we treat people, has been an internal thing only. But that has started to change, and you know, that brings us to Rendanheyi and all of those other things. I am prepared today to walk you through something that we call MOS, which is the MAQE operating system. We call it MOS 1.0. It's the first time that we've codified the internal workings, and we actually have it on paper, so to speak. Again, we're just getting started here, but it's a big step for us. But before we get to that, let me talk say a few words of why Rendanheyi and why a relatively small services organization is being inspired by a very big product company in mainland China primarily. It's a long story again, but we have for many years been intensely curious about, like I mentioned before, new and better ways of working. Look at holacracy, sociocracy, beta codecs, beyond budgeting, you name it, we probably looked at it. And we've adopted things from those various approaches. But every time that we try to introduce a concept like that in Thailand, we've always been met with skepticism, saying, "Oh, you can't do that. That only works in the US. That only works in Europe. It only works for venture-funded tech companies. It would never work. X, Y, and Z, like all the reasons why it can't work. You can't give people freedom like that because they will just take advantage of you, or you can't just let them set their own salaries because this will happen and that will happen." And so while we have not been deterred per se, it's sort of, banging your head against the wall, saying, "Oh, again, we really have to go through this again." Theory X and theory Y is like it's not that long ago. It is long ago. But then higher just miraculously sort of showed itself, and we realized that here's a very large manufacturing company in mainland China putting a lot of the big organizations to shame, and it just opened the possibility for us, saying, "Hey, actually, if they can do it, then surely we should be able to do it as well." And so, while nothing stopped us before, Hire and Rendanheyi showed that it was possible. And they did in a very interesting way, right? On the one hand, it's a very, very big organization, but they decided to tackle bureaucracy in a way that few other organizations have done. Usually you get the sense that they are trying to outsmart bureaucracy, whereas Hire basically said, "You know what? If you let the organization grow beyond a certain limit, bureaucracy will set in. So we'll just not let it grow beyond a certain limit." And so that you have micro enterprises with 10 to 15 people each, and that's how you get around it. Smart. Why didn't I think of that, right? And so for the past year and a half now, thanks with your help as well, it's been trying to learn how Rendanheyi can work and how it can be applied in our context, which I'm sure you know is easier said than done. Rendanheyi is a philosophy as opposed to an operating system, so there's a lot of flexibility in there, and you need to basically write your own playbook, which is what we've done, or what we're trying to do.
Yes, I have one question. So you were talking about bureaucracy, but more specifically, what are the outcomes that you would like to achieve through Rendanheyi or by tweaking the Rendanheyi? What is that you will expect to get for yourself, for your company, your people?
Fair question. So we have this thing called the Trinity that we have at MAQE, and it's basically the way that we define success. And it sounds more sophisticated than it is, I think. But essentially, saying that success for us is maximizing three things: personal fulfillment, customer satisfaction, and company profitability. And the idea there is we have to take a holistic approach to this. And we're not successful if we're just making profit. That's nice. I mean, I like to make profit, but I also want to be proud of the organization that I work for, right? And so personally, I want fulfillment, and I want fulfillment for the people I work with as well. And customer satisfaction is an important part of that, because if I'm fulfilled but the customer is not getting value, then we won't be profitable. So there's you need to balance these three things. You need to maximize all three things. And so Rendanheyi answered that predicament in two particular ways. On the one hand, everyone is an entrepreneur. My co-founder Andrew and I didn't set out to build to become entrepreneurs ourselves. We sort of found ourselves on that journey. As I mentioned before, I'm a designer, he's an engineer. We just wanted to build cool stuff. Only later realized that actually building organizations and building people is really interesting. We realized that we've learned so much over the past decade, things that you can't teach anyone. You just have to allow them to take a similar journey, not the same one, but a similar one. So if we can afford people a similar opportunity that we've had to do this, fulfillment will probably come out of it. So that's one. The other part, and this is probably a direct result of how Andrew and I are as people, introverted and like to think about systems and stuff. We tend to be very inward looking. We tend to focus a lot about how things, as we'll talk more about with AMOS, we tend to focus about how the company works internally. And so I think we've lacked over the years the kind of relentless focus on customer value that companies like Hire and Amazon and Zappos have, right? That famously Bezos always puts an empty chair in a room in order to represent the customer. He does other things that maybe we don't want to emulate, but it's clearly being aware what your customer actually wants and needs is a good thing. And here again, Rendanheyi came with an answer in terms of zero distance to the customer. And it's really interesting when you take a concept like zero distance and think about what that actually means in practice, right? Again, Rendanheyi is a philosophy, not an operating system. And so while a lot of organizations might say, okay, well, we aspire to this notion of zero distance to the customer, if you look at Hire and their mind-boggling organizational structure that they have, that is the logical end result of zero distance. That's what it looks like when you're 80,000 people, which is fascinating. And so trying to learn from their example, even though obviously MAQE is a services company that is way smaller, 80 people as opposed to 80,000 people. But what can we learn from their example to maximize fulfillment for us internally, but also maximize customer satisfaction for what we do, with the hope then for profitability to increase, because at the end of the day we're a business and we want to make money.
Cool, very interesting. I think this need of becoming closer to customers, customer centricity, but at the same time to leave space for people is a big challenge, not just to small companies, but also to big organizations. And you mentioned some of them, just Zappos. And we believe this is really the trend, and connecting, as you said, the market side with the organizational side probably is not so common still. So we are stressing this connection. It may come from the market, it may start from the employee, but nonetheless, you need both of them and both of them to be aligned, and that's what Rendanheyi stresses. But I know that with the MOS, you started to play with the Rendanheyi and actually with other frameworks. What are you doing? What is emerging from this exploration? What are the pillars that you have already defined or that you are just experimenting with?
Yeah, there's so many angles to this, right? It's hard to know where to begin, but I remember, let's say, they were very you guys and probably those people listening will have read a book by Aaron Dignan called Brave New Work, and in it he has this example of an old organizational structure from the 1800s at a railroad company, and it sort of brings it up and says, like, can you date this for me? And obviously you can't, because it looks like any other organizational chart that you see any day. And that seemed like a good starting point. We said, okay, well, if we have, imagine all the things that have happened in the last 100 years. 100 years ago, I think the Model T was around maybe, but that's basically it, right? The internet, commercial space travel, commercial air travel, television, all of those things have happened since then, and yet our organization is exactly the same. Isn't that strange, right? So what, if the traditional bureaucratic hierarchy is not up to par necessarily, Ashby's law and requisite variety and all those things, what's the alternative? And so going out and trying to find an alternative way to visualize how work is actually being done led us to this notion of actually, you know what, rather than having an organizational structure that is based on positions, having one that is based on roles is probably the best first step. And for those of you who are not familiar with that concept, in a traditional organization, if you look in the organizational chart, you will find your position, or you will find yourself in one particular place. Right? You are right there, and you report to that person. But that's basically what the organizational chart can tell you, right? It tells you who you report to. A role-based organizational structure is different in the sense that it doesn't include, it doesn't cover people. It only covers the roles that it's sort of filling, which means that one person can fulfill many different roles, which probably is actually exactly what goes on in 99.9% of all organizations already. If you sit down and you start listing out all the various things that you do, it's not going to be just, I'm a product manager. I'm a product manager, but I also coach two people. And I also make coffee every Sunday and whatever, and so looking at something like holacracy and sociocracy, and also Beta Codex that talks a lot about this different sides of an organizational structure, org physics, led us down the path of thinking that, okay, we need something new here, and so we started experimenting with I don't even know what to call it actually, bubble diagrams, circles in holacratic or sociocracy speak, and that seems to be a viable path forward. So that's what we're doing. We are reorganizing ourselves from a matrix structure to a role-based organizational structures with these circles, and then taking some learnings from Rendanheyi along the way with us.
That's very interesting. How do you see the connection between the two? So on one side you have sociocracy and holacracy, and they are very much about governance, how they would say, or dynamic governance. On the other side, Rendanheyi brings lots of focus on entrepreneurship, potentially profit, not so much attention maybe at the team level. How these two flavors or philosophies, as you said, come together, and what's the interplay that you see?
Yeah. So if I didn't mention it already, let me say that again. That I really appreciate, when it comes to Rendanheyi, I really appreciate the focus on entrepreneurship and the P&L statement. I think that's good. I like that. But it's in terms of how they work together. I think actually, even you told me before, the boundaryless team, you use sociocracy and Rendanheyi together, right? And my thinking around this is that if you imagine a continuum where we place these things, so Rendanheyi will be on one end of the spectrum. And I've defined Rendanheyi as I characterized this as a philosophy before. And then let's put holacracy at the other end, because holacracy is very, very structured, and Rendanheyi is not. So in terms of an organizational operating system, holacracy is an organizational operating system, in my opinion, in the true sense of the word, whereas Rendanheyi is more of a philosophy. So Rendanheyi doesn't tell you anything about how you should actually, make decisions, or how you should define roles. It just says it just gives you some markers and it gives you some direction for what to emphasize. So I actually think that they work really well, and so we've tried in MOS to combine these things and leverage, consent-based decision making, for example, which is just a tool. But then apply it in a way that, or to apply it to processes that will allow our current employees transition into more entrepreneurial roles and actually taking P&L responsibility. So it sounds a bit abstract, but I think they're absolutely absolutely can work together.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mic.
No, sorry.
They can work together, but I have a follow-up question. Don't you think that suggesting a decision-making model to the micro enterprise or to the small teams somewhat limits the possibilities of the entrepreneur? Again, I'm telling you, you have to be democratic, or you have to be inclusive or consensual, or to use IDM. There is the model that that holacracy uses. So in a sense, I'm telling you how to manage your business. How does it interplay with guaranteeing freedom?
For sure. Fair point. I think we are. Let me draw a parallel here to agile. So MAQE has. When did we adopt agile? 2013, I think. Agile provides a baseline for how software development is. But at least for us, we treat it as a baseline. Every team is introduced to the core concepts. Every team is taught how it should be run by the book. We encourage people to apply and experiment with it, and then change it, right? Within MAQE, even though we say like, okay, well, in general, we have a Scrum primer, and our teams run according to that. At least for the more long-running teams, they will all have differences or new ways of working that they've adopted along the way that works for them, and that's fine. I think it's good to allow the teams to have that freedom and responsibility to adapt, but I also think it's good to have a joint starting point, so that we have a common language around these things. If no one understands what product demo is, that might be a problem. Whereas if one company said, oh, actually we talk to our customers and we don't do product demos because X, Y, and Z, well, that's fine. As long as it works for you. Again, it's fulfillment, customer satisfaction, profitability. If you can deliver those three things, I don't really mind. But I want to set you up with the best possible systems and approach that we found, and then you can work from that. And again, context is everything, right? You just, from organizations, you need culture market fit, you need organizational market fit, and I think the same thing is true here. Every new ME that we spin up is probably going to need a slightly different way of working.
Okay, and what about the profit and purpose? At the beginning, you said we really care about treating people well, so a focus on the human being. One of the strongest critics that I often hear about Rendanheyi is the heavy focus on profit, on using profit as a currency for understanding the exchanges between different micro enterprises or what is driving enterprise micro communities. How do they go together? Are you using profit as the metric, or using the profit and something else, or something else entirely?
Well, so profit is one of the three. So every team, every unit that you will find inside of MAQE will have a triangulate of metrics. One being profitability. Some of the teams are at least so far entirely internal, which means that they don't have a P&L yet. We can get into this, and in terms of how do you transition over to borrow a term from Sappho's market-based dynamics. How do you transition over to that when you don't have something like that beforehand? That's something that we're struggling with right now. But we've given every team these three things to look at. One has to do with the health of the team, one has to do with the health of, or the happiness of their customer, and the third one is some sort of profitability or budgeting, balancing the budget kind of responsibility. I get it though. I mean, I happen to like the focus. Sorry, my daughter is going to be an opera singer. I like to focus on profit, only because myself has been able to use it as a measure of whether what I'm doing is actually working. The problem I think comes in is like if you make someone responsible for profit and then don't give them full autonomy, that's not right. But if you want to go on a journey and you have full autonomy, then profit could be one of these three metrics that will show you whether you're going the right way.
And I don't know if you want to show something in terms of slides, but in your documents, I've seen a couple of interesting concepts. The first one is that you have multiple platforms. So what you call platforms, but at the same time, I also seen that you created different kinds of teams. So they look like sort of templates for what you can do in a team. And again, this is something that is missing in the Rendanheyi. So it's something that you are building on top. Can you tell us a bit more about the details of what you are playing with and what you are adding to the Rendanheyi as a model?
Sure. Should I maybe
Please go ahead.
A picture says more than 1,000 words, as I said.
Sure.
We can maybe share this with people afterwards too. Because there's no secrets. Make sure I have that. So you're absolutely right. There are platforms in here, and there's some other words that, if you're familiar with agile, you'll probably recognize.
Just let me know if you want me to share instead.
I think I got it. You can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So let's do this. So just a few notes from the top here. So MOS, operating system designed to deliver speed and agility at scale through the free movement of people and ideas. And I'll explain what I mean by that. This is the big, hairy, audacious goal that we've set for ourselves. But from a more concrete point of view, now that we're starting out, then we're introducing a role-based organizational structure with nested circles that explains who is doing what and when. I think the creator of the beta code explained this really well, in the sense that you want the system to show where work actually gets done. And so that's what we're trying to do. What we've started with is three levels of concentric circles. Level one, we rather than just call it the parent circle that you do in sociocracy or holacracy, we just call it platform, or we call it platform because we have particular ideas for how it should work. What they are: people, delivery, learning, service, mission, and commerce. These are all idiosyncrasies of the organization that we already have. And I can try to explain that. It would probably take me 3 hours. So for now, let me just say that each of these platforms have a particular and unique purpose to fulfill. So for example, the people platform, everything that goes on that platform will be focused on fulfillment and coaching and professional development of the people that work at MAQE. And the service platform is basically in Rendanheyi and higher, they call it the shared services. So all the business administration operation functions that we share across the company happens there. Delivery, obviously, that's where all our agile teams are working to deliver software. Mission, best thing I can explain there. So the missions are gets its name from mission-oriented organizational units, people that come together for a temporary amount of time to do a particular project. I remember Pepsi responsive ways of working that I introduced a few years ago. They termed it slam teams. It's a sort of nice term for that. Small, lean, autonomous, self-organized teams that come together to do a particular thing, and then they disband. So the idea here is that people will be able to move across these platforms based on these roles, and we avoid platforms, or sorry, we avoid silos by having people move around. So that's level one.
Sorry, one question about this. So
yeah.
the purpose or the aim, as sociology will call it, is it defined through some kind of consensual decision making by the people in the circle, or is it created top down?
So the platform, at least in this initial stage, this is, I guess, as top down as you can get. There is a mission group of people where I'm involved that is doing this currently, and so we're providing a starting point. But the hope is to put what's it? I'm missing the word here.
To bring it up.
To let this evolve over time with by letting it be freeless. But I think it's good to have a starting point, something that people can look at and react to. Because if you start from nothing, then it's very difficult to get anywhere. That's the plan at least.
Thank you.
The solid line circles here are shared service platforms. Those are internal platforms. They don't have P&L responsibility, but there is one what Hire calls industry platforms where we will have a bunch of MEs. And I have another slide here just to show that in the future, as we continue to evolve, we will introduce additional industry platforms with MEs working in different industries or verticals. But actually, one key thing for MAQE right now is that we need to differentiate and position ourselves on the market. So we need to be known for something. And so we are a specialist when it comes to personalized commerce. So hence having one platform to begin with. But in the future, it could be more. Level 2 is the teams. So there is one type of team on each platform. And so this is what, Emanuele, this is what you mentioned before. So these things, squads, teams, service crews, mission crews, micro enterprises, and guilds, these are all idiosyncrasies from years past. It's just what we have called these different units at MAQE for years and years and years. A squad exists on the people platform. We call them people squads. And so those are groups of up to 8 people that coach and support each other in terms of professional development. Guilds are, let's see if maybe I actually have, there you go, or interest groups that come together to discuss and share knowledge and forward our thinking in certain areas. So there's an IoT guild, there's a design guild, there's a machine learning guild, there's a quality assurance guild, and so on. And again, people move freely around those things. So anyone can join or contribute to any one of these things on their
I have a question here because I see that, of course, guilds or it could be tribes in the Spotify language could be something different from a small team. But it is my understanding here that what you call team, squad, mission-driven teams, MEs, and probably also shared services teams are actually teams. So small groups of people with plenty of freedom. Is that the case? So is there any structural difference among them, or it's more, the result of your history?
A little bit of both. You're right, they're all small teams, but they do differ in certain ways. So for example, and actually, one key thing is the kind of metrics that we're responsible for. So teams are usually working for an external client to deliver something on time and budget. A service crew is usually staffed by full-time people who work only, on that. So the finance team, for example, the finance crew, we call it a service crew. That's what they do, right? Mission crews are different because mission crews are temporary. So a service crew is long-term, a mission crew is temporary. A guild, it doesn't really exist as a separate entity. Just a bunch of people come together in a room every once per week, and then they disband again. So they're all different in that sense. And actually, you mentioned Spotify. The fact that the terms are similar have created a lot of confusion over the years, because the way that we use guilds and squads, the terms are not the same. Don't it's not a one-to-one relationship that way. It's just what we happen to call it at the time. I don't even remember.
Thank you.
Yeah. But maybe the most interesting thing here is obviously the fact that we're introducing micro enterprises, which we haven't had before. So squads, teams, and crews and guilds we've had before, but MEs are new. What with Rendanheyi. And the difference here is that an ME will be a profit and loss generating entity. It will be a separate entity. And so we are actually, in addition to, I don't have it visualized here, but we're also working to implement an incubation process, a venture program that will guide new MEs through a series of 4 stages where they will basically achieve product market fit. By ways of getting investment and support from the rest of the company. And so that way we hope to be able to transition as many people as that want to transition out of the traditional roles that they can actually take on ME and become entrepreneurs and run their own business.
Okay. If you want to share some more details about the structure, that would be helpful. But then I would like to jump into the work that you are doing on contracts and let's say incubating new, I guess, MEs or new structures. Because again, I think you added some pieces there, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's where I'm personally focusing most of my time right now, because we can't launch MEs without being very specific with the ownership and equity stake that a new ME owner can expect once he finishes the incubation process. Let me just show you a few more things here. So these are I don't know if this makes much sense actually for external audiences, but these are the triangulate, the 3 things, the metrics that each of these platform units are responsible for. So fulfillment, performance. You can see that this person fulfillment, client satisfaction, and company profitability, they're all metrics aligned with one of these things, right? And so we like to measure things at MAQE, so much so that my main problem is actually that we measure so many things that it's hard to get people to participate in all the measurements. But that's a separate story for another day. But I like data. But we want to make sure that people get as much of an unfiltered feedback as they can based on how they're doing. So perception is reality, and sometimes we are flawed human beings, and we have biases, and if we don't get told, if we don't see it on paper, we don't believe it. So we try to get around that by utilizing data whenever we can, even when that includes fluffy measurements. I think that's okay actually. There's a book that I really like to call How to Measure Anything. And the first thing is like actually fluffy measurements is okay. You don't have to, everything doesn't have to be statistically significant. A measurement is good if it teaches you something that you didn't know before. And once you think of it that way, actually, the world is your oyster, so to speak. But anyway, so that's the metrics, and the last part here is just the roles. So there will be a ton of different roles in MOS. We are currently we're trying to finish this now, but we're defining these roles as you would do in sociocracy and holacracy as well. So there is actually a role templates available to iterate from. Platform owners, team leads, and team contributors are some of the main ones, but there are others. We don't have time to go into it. We have, since a few years, we have our own template for this called the A5. It's small enough to fit on an A5 piece of paper. That we use to define roles, but it's very similar to holacracy actually, in a sense. It's sort of aligned on that. But the important part there being that, again, if every person at MAQE have a number of roles, then it's important that they are defined so we know what they are. And me, for example, I will have a bunch of different roles, and it's good then that people can see what they are and what my responsibilities are. So my last point here is that the point here is this. The point here is that we're trying to create an ecosystem where people can move around, and we can go beyond silos, and so to make sure that information is shared freely between these different platforms, so that we don't end up with an us versus them mentality that you find in a lot of organizations.
Cool. Thank you. Now, this is very interesting. It's a bit different from the Rendanheyi, of course. In the Rendanheyi, you often have one individual and one ME, and I must say that roles are not that defined as in sociocracy and holacracy. You really stressed it, and you stressed the fluidity of the system, the possibility of the individual to join different parts of the system nodes. Ayer would say, but I know that you also reflected on the contracts, and what I found very interesting in your work is that you addressed the question that we are getting a lot. The question is, what's the amount of time or what's the amount of focus that an individual should put into this new structure, into this new organization design, if I'm starting from a traditional hierarchical space in which most of my time is, dictated by the hierarchy, not by my freedom or my entrepreneurship. It seems you thought about that and you developed a journey, a process for giving increasing freedom to individuals without sinking the ship. Is that right?
Yeah. We had to. I was going to say, little bit of a byproduct of the fact that we are a service organization. We for better or worse live by the billable hour, and so we always. Don't get me started. I can talk about the billable hour for a long time, but we had to keep that in mind. How do we transition someone over to this new system where as most service organizations, we need to be 80% billable. Otherwise, we're not breaking even. So how do we do this? So once I started talking to the team about the fact that we are going to do this, we are going to provide the means for you to start your own businesses, then the first question it became very practical right away, and when people want to know, like, how is this going to work, how much time do I get, how much money do I get to spend, when can I start, on the one hand, it was actually very encouraging because already we have 3 or 4 people who are actively starting to do this, even though we've only a few months in, who's actively wanting to launch new business. On the other is stressful because now I really need to make this work right now, but it's good. It makes sure that things move forward. You're absolutely right. So we started thinking about contracts in 3 parts. We thought about employment contracts. We talked about the contracts of incorporation, and we talked about partnership contracts, and then all, with a specific reference for Rendanheyi. One thing that I actually like about the hires model is that, Emanuela, you said that they get some flack for the fact that it's so profit focused, and it's a bit rough around the edges maybe. However, being Swedish, the little socialist that I have inside of me really like the fact that the hire has this UBI, universal basic income, meaning that if you fail in your new startup, it's not like you're kicked out on the street. You actually fall back into the system for a period of time. They're not paying you a lot, but it's enough for you to get by, and then they encourage you to start again and again. If you presumably, if you make the same mistake over and over again, you're not going to have a chance to start again, but you do have multiple chances, and I like that, because God knows we all make mistakes, right? And so we want to think about that as well, and that's why the employment contract came in. And again, Hire doesn't have employees; they have entrepreneurs, but we need to transition from where we are to where we're going. But the contract of incorporation was where the rubber hit the road, so to speak, because the guys and gals who wants to start with ME.
Sorry, do you want to share also that on the screen?
Oh, yes. This, what I'm going to share next, is simply a list that I have in Notion. Let's see how I do that. Yes.
And maybe while you find the document, yes, again, this is a big question in terms of how to nudge a traditional system to transition to a more entrepreneurial approach, and how it looks like you can protect people, but also help them to have skin in the game. It seems you really try to address this. So yes, please go ahead. I think we have a number of ideas in this document.
Yeah, and actually something that's not in the document, but actually I think it's a very important part of this, is this idea of it's who, not what. And what I mean by that is it's incredibly important not just to go where the opportunity is, but actually let someone passionate about the opportunity go after. Everyone complains about not having too much time. I think we have plenty of time. We lack headspace, but the end result is the same. If you're passionate, you have a much higher chance of getting there. And there might be opportunities that it's just not me. But I have people that I work with who want to do slightly different things, and so they should be able to go after that particular opportunity. So who, not what, is an important part of this. But again, MAQE is a professional services company. We live by the billable hour, and so what we try to do here is that through these 4 stages, apparently, and I learned from taking your Rendanheyi masterclass, is that Hire also have a 4-stage incubation process, which is a funny coincidence. But we define these 4 stages. Stage 1, ideation. We expect the person to work on their own behalf to figure out what their service company is going to do, because this is particular service organization. It's not product organizations. I'm in the startup world a lot, and the focus is always on building product. Building product is expensive, takes a lot of time. I don't have that kind of capital, and so we're focusing on launching new service businesses, because service businesses are fairly quick and easy to get started. So during stage 1 ideation, 80% of your time is spent in doing billable work for MAQE. You have 20% of your time to do anything else, including spending time on your to-be ME. So start with an idea, you focus on service design. It ends when your pitch is ready and you're not eligible for investment. The pitch here is interesting because I am not the judge. There will be an independent body of people, no judges, that we bring in. So it's not that the boss says what's good enough. What we try to do through this is that the market tells you what's good enough. Because I'm wrong, I don't, it's just time and time again, I've been shown that what I think is good is not necessarily what other people think is good, right? So the market tells you whether it works and not. I happen to be the CEO now, but hopefully I won't be in the future. So stage two, if you're able to convince a panel of judges that this actually has a bearing, then we start with a validation stage where you need to go out to the market and say you need to pitch this, you need to sell this to customers, and you need to have 3 signed contracts within a particular period of time, and you get some seed funding, etc., etc. But mainly you get more time. So 60% of your time is spent with MAQE, 40% on your ME. So if you're able to do that, you go into operations, you get 40% with MAQE, 60% with ME, you get some more funding. Now you actually have to deliver projects to customers and do it in a way that they are profitable and the clients are happy, because otherwise we won't let you go further. And if you do that, you get down to the last point where you get more time and more money, and now you need to basically balance your own budget. We're still experimenting with the exact numbers, but the mechanisms are there. The interesting part for me is this part, right? So if you're successful, if you're able to balance your budget and make it past stage 4, we will spin this off as a separate entity and make you and make takes this is the part where I'm actually struggling with right now, because I realize I need a financial model to actually show how this is going to work and to make sure that it doesn't break my bank. I want to provide as much financial support as I can, but I also want to make sure that it breaks even, right? Because, for example, if we are going to do 10 or 15 of these per year, how many of them do we expect to make it past stage 4, and what do we get in turn for that? Is there a profit share going on? Does MAQE take a profit out of the ME going in to pay for the remaining incubation process? Stuff like that we're trying to figure out.
Andreas, this is really fascinating. We are near the lecture. I would like to give Claire the space for asking a couple of questions. Claire, if you want to go ahead.
Andreas, hi. Yeah. This is a huge amount to take in terms of what you've been doing. So massive respect for the exploration you've been on over the last sort of year or so. I'm just curious to ask, what was the trigger from your perspective to actually begin this journey?
That's a good question. I mean, we have particular objectives and goals that we want to achieve, and I guess the honest answer is that the COVID situation has had us re-examining where we are going and how we're going to get there, and realizing that I should be honest to say, like, for me, you can imagine me being a specialist in digital commerce. COVID has actually been good for business, which is, I shouldn't say that out loud, but it's been okay for us. It makes the question of, or it raises the question of how are we going to do what we set out to do. MAQE's mission, by the way, as I haven't mentioned yet, defined in 2016, was to literally change how it works, because we think that work is broken and needs to be fixed, and we think more people deserve the opportunity to find fulfillment through work, and what can a small professional services firm in Bangkok, Thailand do about that's an audacious goal and all of those things. But we realized that if we want to borrow to make a dent in the universe and have an impact, we need to scale, we need to grow bigger, We need to remain fast, and we need to remain nimble. And everything we know about scale basically suggests that it doesn't, the scale, speed and agility doesn't go hand in hand with scale, right? And so if we want to, make a conscious effort to go after our very audacious goal and scale the company, how do we do that in a way that is conducive to where we want to go and how we want to get there? And I guess one thing led to another, right? I have to say too that there's a lot of these things that, I mean, we're cobbling things together, but we're building on, we're standing on shoulders of giants, as they say, right, with holacracy, sociocracy, and all of these things, right? So there's a lot of work trying to piece things together and for things to work in our context, and then communicating this in an organization, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess that's the.
So when I think about sort of Zappos, they're sort of the culture and their core values were basically the trigger for everything. So I suppose my interest lies in that, in the cultural side of it, and how you really embed those values in all the decisions that you're making. You said at the beginning that sort of the values bit came afterwards, or it was something that you thought about afterwards. How is that emerging in terms of being a sort of a stable metric, or a stable core, if you like, from which to move forward for employees?
Well, actually, so interesting experiment. So having sat through this now for almost an hour, if I say that our core values are purpose, humility, growth, and freedom, hopefully what we've done and what we're doing will correspond quite well with those four things, right? Purpose, humility, growth, and freedom. And we use the values actually, and behaviors, virtues, as guiding stars. Related, something that we don't want to. We're never going to. I'm missing a word again. We always want to stay true to the values. That's
yeah.
And the values have helped us find, make decisions along the way here for how things should work. And in some cases it might be a little bit aspirational, in the sense that we don't know if it's going to work, but we hope that, keeping, as an example, we are a professional service firm. We live by the bill of an hour, and so on. But still, we have actually made a decision from a lot of years ago that we only sell 80% of our time, so that 20% of people's time is devoted to professional development and learning and sharing. And I don't think a lot of organizations do that, because there's 20% that you can make more money with, right? Whereas we have to go through this sometimes painful process of talking to customers, saying, no, actually, 4 days per week is how much our consultants will work for you, because the reason we are good is because we spend this time. And some people get that, some people don't. But this again goes back to the values.
Thank you. I think we touched upon a number of interesting topics. As short conclusions, my feeling is that MAQE is another demonstration that you can take and apply the Rendanheyi to contexts that are much smaller than Hire or Zappos even. That you can do that in a place that is, culturally speaking, different from China, because Thailand is not, of course, is not China. You can do that in a different industry. We are talking about consulting. We are talking about services, not product. We are talking about e-commerce and not, what good appliance. There are a number of differences. And the last, for me, the last point is that you can do that by integrating other frameworks, other ideas, whether that's sociocracy, holacracy, beyond budgeting, and also what I understood between the lines is a different, slightly different culture, right? That you are trying to bring, and Claire's questions were going in that direction. And this is happening. So for me, this is really, you know, another confirmation, but also another inspiration of how you can not just copy what Ayer is doing, but play with that, be responsible for tweaking it. And Andreas, you were saying also being responsible for communicating it, meaning bringing your own organization into this journey. What are the next steps? So in conclusion, what is going to happen in the next few months, the next few years? What's your end goal for all of this? What kind of dent you would like to see in the universe because of this work?
Yeah. So if you know, if I dream, next steps, very tangible things. We need to do a financial model for the acceleration program. We need to get the contracts done. We need to do all of these things, and we need to start shipping MEs. That's how we put it, right? There's a pent up demand within MAQE, and people want to do it. We just have to make sure that we have the facility to make it happen. So that's on one day. Long term, though, I very much want to show that something else is possible. The way that we're talking about these things is, you know, let's be frank and say most organizations they don't work they don't work like this, especially not in our neck of the woods. And if we can encourage some other companies to experiment and try to provide a better environment for people and fulfillment and all those things, I think that's a valid things to go after.
Thank you so much. We are beyond top of the hour. Thanks, Andreas, for your ideas. Thanks, Claire, for being here, bringing your questions. I really hope that this will be the beginning of a conversation, because I suspect that much more will emerge in the coming months. So, Andreas, please keep sharing with us, with the community. And I'm also expecting other reactions. We'll share publicly this video. So if you want to reach out to Andreas, to me, to Claire, please do that. And there is so much to experiment with, to discover, and also to learn together. That was my conversation with Andreas before the beginning, and I really believe into that. We have to experiment together, we have to learn together, and we have to generate impact together. That's why we are having these conversations. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much.
At the end of this conversation with Andreas, let me recap a few thoughts about what emerged. A consistent set of objections is often raised when introducing the Rendanheyi to people outside of hire. Things such as it is meant only for huge multinational companies, it is designed to fit China and its specific socio-political context. All the energy of the system is targeted to generating profit. It might work well in manufacturing, but what about other sectors? The level of pressure on the individual is too high. It looks so unique and detached from other well-known approaches such as steel, agile, holacracy, and finally, its adoption, in the case of hire, took forever. Well, our interview with Andreas from MAQE proved all these objections weak at best. A small, not huge firm in Thailand, not China, providing services and not products. In the digital sector, e-commerce instead of manufacturing, MAQE concretely shows groundbreaking possibilities to look at the Rendanheyi for inspiration well beyond the environment in which it has been created. And this realization alone should potentially open its study to millions of organizations, from tiny startups to large incumbents in any part of the world. And those that seem hard prerequisites in Ayer's journey commencing from an extreme call to high levels of entrepreneurial skill in the game for all actors involved, may not necessarily prevent other companies from benefiting in a contextually different way from its ideas. I'm saying that because in MAQE, access to entrepreneurships comes through a gradual increase in the amount of effort, autonomy, and investment dedicated to new initiatives, depending on the results achieved at every stage. For them, entrepreneurship is a welcome, but not a mandatory path for everybody, as contribution is also possible beyond micro enterprises and incubation contracts. And also, with all its interest in being and remaining profitable as any other digital services firm, MAQE's design intentionally balances hard returns with other metrics. Success is defined as the Trinity, a triangle of personal fulfillment, customer satisfaction, and profitability to be kept contemporarily in mind. And the team's autonomy is bounded and counterbalanced by it. Such an approach resonates with Zappos and other companies close to Ayers Rendanheyi, but going beyond money as the only currency to track value exchange among micro enterprises and within ecosystem micro communities. It also paves the way to not-for-profits, to NGOs and government agencies that may want to gain from the high level of responsiveness, agility, proactiveness allowed by the Rendanheyi, but without necessarily reasoning in terms of shareholders' value. And having skin in the game may seem daunting and scary, both for employees and for the managers coordinating them in traditional companies. The risk of putting too much pressure on structure or individuals is resolved by MAQE by activating an innovation management process, one that allows employees to intentionally share and get help at implementing their best ideas, using crowdsourcing to attract, to validate, to incubate new venture. Looks like another hack at decentralizing innovation, while also catalyzing a smooth transition towards the Rendanheyi. Boundaryless uses the same participative approach to collect pilot ideas in the initial phases of our own engagements. And also makes trajectory, makes it definitely clear how the Rendanheyi can be easily and fruitfully complemented by other frameworks, such as holacracy and sociocracy, to bridge maximum levels of entrepreneurship and customer centricity on one side, with the idea of an organization made by fluid circles and collections of explicit roles more than job positions. A more precise look into team dynamics, such as decision-making, feedback management, planning, and meeting management within the micro enterprises is for sure emerging as a recurring need in most organizations Andreas is talking with. And a final takeaway from our conversation with Andreas is how apparently hard to digest forward-looking concepts, such as micro enterprises, enterprise micro communities, distributed profit and loss, industry platforms, and alternative ownership schemes can be indeed introduced with relative simplicity and safety when a tailored, iterative, experimental, and participative intervention model is embraced. To this regard, MAQE reminded us about the importance of avoiding top-down, big design upfront, excessively prescriptive rollout programs when facing an organizational evolution like the one brought by Rendanheyi, inherently infused by complexity, emergence, and unpredictability as the external market conditions it hopes to address. Thank you so much for staying with us, and please join us in our next EO conversation.